the difference between revenue of a company and the value of the company. Most don't know the difference.
So yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Revenue, obviously, you've got to generate revenue. You got to be profitable over time because mouths need to be fed. And you can generate a tremendous income with a income-based or revenue-based company, but it doesn't mean it's sellable. And people are surprised when, Rich, what do you mean? My company's generating $1 million a month or 10 million, profit a year. Why would it not be sellable? Okay, you're too involved in the day-to-day of the business. More than 25% of your sales comes from an individual, client that you play golf with each weekend. Well, what do you think is going to happen to that client when you retire? They're going to open it up for bid and go somewhere else.
Now, if you're listening to this show, chances are you have spent the last few years, or maybe the last decade, pouring everything into your business. You've done the pitches, closed the deals, learned how to love the grind. But here's what no one really prepares you for. The moment when you realize you might want out, or worse, the moment you have to figure out if you're even ready to be done. Welcome back to Whiskey is for Closers. Today, we're talking about something most founders try not to think about until it's too late: the exit. That's where our guest comes in. Rich Hall has spent his career working with founders at exactly that inflection point. He helps business owners navigate transitions, build real options, and make sure their exit actually reflects what they want, not just what they have to settle for. We're going to talk about the founders who maybe built themselves into corners, the misconceptions that sabotage your own deal, and why preparation matters more than luck. Plus, we are going to hear firsthand Rich's story about his trip to New York City that somehow, from what I understand, explains everything about how he sees business transitions. Rich, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. So guys.
Man, thank you for having me, Craig. What a blast. Let's have a good time today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, we got to start with, the important things, which is what are we all drinking today? Who wants to go first?
Steve, why don't you go? I went first last time.
Okay.
So do you want to go first today?
Sure. Happy to, man. So if you are a regular listener to our show, you know that we are big fans of Leaper's Fork Distillery in Leaper's Fork, Tennessee. So I was there recently because I was there visiting Drew and Craig, and they pointed out this. They call it the blend off winter. So in September of last year, they had a blend off where they invited a group of bartenders from the Nashville area to come in and basically create their own unique blends of different Leaper's Forks, whiskey and bourbon, whatnot. And then they had a taste test, and this is the winner. So this is actually a custom blend, and it says on the bottle all the things that are in here, but it's a blend of different things that have been aged for at least 6 years. And so the winner, I think his name was Anthony Martin, he was the winner. So his blend was then created, and they barreled it and they sell it in limited quantity. So I picked up a bottle when I was there. It's really nice. It's very nice. Yep. So it's a mixture of rye, whiskey, and bourbon in a unique combination. So
that's amazing. First of all, I live not very far from there, and I didn't get my hands on that. So that sounds like something I need to get my beak wet on at some point when I'm down visiting you, Steve, which is going to be pretty soon. So it's exciting.
By the time you come see me, this bottle's going to be gone. So you just need to go to Leaper's Fork.
He's going to bring more.
Fine, if I have to. Okay, so for me today, this is a staple for me in my cabinet. I have a friend who lives up in Lexington, and he lives close to the Buffalo Trace Distillery. And one of their lines is one of my absolute favorites, and this is Mr. Taylor, This is my go-to. I love this. First of all, you guys can refer to me as Mr. King Snake. For those of you who don't watch this but are actually listening, my name on here is Mr. King Snake. You're going to have to listen and just know that that comes from a previous episode, and there might be a little treat involved if you can name that one and directly email me. I'm making this up as I go. So the great thing is today is all about Taylor. So thank you, Mr.
Well, I love it. Well, okay. So that was a very hard transition, but we'll go from here. I lived in Louisville, Kentucky for about 8 years. In 2016, they launched a new distillery called Angel's Envy. And still to date, this is one of my all-time favorite bourbons. Just the standard Angel's Envy. As a part of their process, they finish it in a port wine barrel. So they do that for all of their finishes. It's the first time I'd ever experienced a bourbon that had a different finish like that. And it has been a staple and a go-to ever since. So that's
a solid choice, Greg. Well done.
Yeah.
I like
Cheers.
it. Anything that's finished in any kind of a wine barrel is usually pretty darn good.
Pretty good.
Yes.
Yep. I've been
All
to this
right, well,
distillery too. It's a cool one.
Let's see about this one, gentlemen. So when I first met my wife many years ago, it was on a blind date. And at the time, I was drinking Jack Daniels and Coke with a lime, by the way.
Of course.
Nice.
And I walked into the restaurant, and right in the lobby area with this absolutely breathtakingly beautiful woman. And I was thinking, man, wouldn't that be nice? I mean, she's fine, and I'd love to end up with her. And as we all sat down and I met the people that brought us together, she sat down beside me and they started ordering drinks. And that's what she ordered, was a Jack and Coke. Okay.
With a lime?
Now, with a lime. And that was unusual. A lot of women, it's not necessarily their first drink. So we did end up getting married. We've been married for 32 years. And we have enjoyed the different versions that Jack Daniels has. And the one that I'm having today is actually Jack Daniels Sinatra.
Wow.
It's arguably their top line. And I first opened it about 2 years ago when my middle son got married. And it's the first time it's been open until today.
How cool.
So we're enjoying it with the fine gentleman that we have on this call.
Cheers to that,
Yeah.
Rich.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Well done, Rich. Way to go,
Yeah,
man. Way to
okay.
turn Jack and Coke into something sophisticated.
Yeah. Right?
Hey, that and for the ladies, right? Man, you never know. Yeah.
Never know.
And as I encourage people, we also are going out for date night tonight. So
Cool.
we get
Very
to enjoy each other and have a good evening. So thank you,
That's
gentlemen,
awesome.
for being part of it.
Yeah. Love it. Thanks for including us.
That's really cool. I love
So
that
cool.
story. And by the way, the Jack Daniels distillery is not too far from the Leaper's Fork distillery. So it's a great distillery tour. I enjoyed that one a lot. So, because it's the original one that's been there since the very beginning, man. It's hard to believe that all of the Jack Daniels in the world gets made in that one location. So
When they say, I've been on the tour many years ago, but when they say charcoal filter, there was a gentleman about 75 years old with a bonfire of their certain type of wood and a garden hose creating the charcoal.
yeah, we saw
So
that too.
it's literally probably something that could have been done in the hills of Tennessee, 100, 200 years ago. But
That's right.
anyway,
That's
Yeah,
what
it
makes
was
it
good.
so
That's
cool.
cool.
I mean, it's like stepping back in time. So
That's
very
so cool.
cool. Awesome.
That's
Well,
so
Rich,
cool.
let's talk to. I mean, I would be cool talking about whiskey the whole time. I mean, I have no problem with that. But let's go to the New York City trip, right? So Craig alluded to this trip to New York City and how that might flow into the conversation we're going to have today. So let's tell us about it.
yeah.
Let's go.
And Craig, which trip to New York City? That's the question.
Your first trip was what you had shared initially. Your
Oh,
first
okay.
trip to New York City.
Yes. So let's just say that it was quite the experience. And here was a person from the South that had not been to New York. And although I had traveled some, that was the company I was working for. And the boss at the time said, it's going to be 3 or 4 of us, and we're going to take you out. And they took us down the street after work. And the first place that we stopped off at was, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but it was a S&M bar.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
That's a wild
now-
first New York experience.
I don't necessarily swing that way or enjoy that. Okay.
Understood.
This is a whole new direction.
But again,
I love it.
different people, different cultures. And, the show was an experience, but we got out of there pretty darn fast. Okay. And then one that the gentleman from the South would appreciate is that we then went to a place in the meatpacking district. Now, back then, there weren't restaurants as much as there was meatpacking. And we walked in, or we approached, and man, it's blaring Southern rock. And I mean, you walk in, and I'm like, Southern rock in New York City? You walk in, and there's, pecan shells on the floor. So we step up to the bar, and we're having a drink, and the bartender ladies said, would you please move your drink? So I just slid it back a little bit. And then she looked at me sort of stern and she said, no, pick up your drink. I thought, crap, man, is there something I'm wrong here? I'm going to get taken out back and beat up or something. And all of a sudden, I picked it up. The music started playing. They stood up on the bar, the bartenders, and started dancing. And then people would walk up to them, kick their head back, and they would mix drinks in their mouth. You want to guess where that came from?
Coyote Ugly?
Coyote Ugly.
Coyote Ugly. That was the place that they filmed it from. And again,
Wow.
Who knew? New York, right?
Yeah.
But here was a great part. The third place we went to, it's about 10:30 when we got there. And back then, we would have a cocktail and we had cigars. And it was a little small location, hole in the wall, you would call it, or today people would call it a speakeasy.
Yeah.
And we walked in, and it was a nice little jazz bar. And I thought, hey, this is good. Nice way to end up the evening. And at the front was the band and the players, the singers. And then you could sit all the way up front. I mean, literally within 2 feet of them. And we sat down, and they just belted some of the absolute best jazz you'd ever heard. But here was the thing. Here was the kicker. When the singers decided to take a break, the band stayed and continued playing, but they handed the microphone out to the audience. And the person sitting right beside me stood up and singing the best jazz. And I thought, wait a minute, what is this? And then when they finished, they handed it off. And come to find out, it was the place in New York where all of the top jazz performers would go to after work, after they got off their shift. And it's a place called Arthur's Tavern. Now, the reason I bring that up too is that over the holidays this time, during Christmas, we took our granddaughter to New York. And she's 17 years old, absolutely fantastic, and did all of the sightseeing. But then we went to Arthur's Tavern. It's still open, and it's still playing fantastic jazz.
That's awesome.
So how's that for a first night in the city?
That's pretty dang good, man. That's really cool. I think I know I've heard of Arthur's Tavern and the meatpacking district. I've been there too, but I didn't go there, and I'm kind of bummed about it.
Well, and don't go to that first place, Steve. I mean, don't.
Drew's already been.
That's not a place that we frequent. But
is it still there as well?
I have never inquired and have no desire to. Don't want to be offensive to any of our listeners, but it wasn't for me. But again, it's the thing that you meet about different people, different cities, different cultures, different businesses. Is everyone's different, and if you treat them pretty well, guess what? You'll get it in return.
Yeah.
So that was all right. Yes.
Yeah. That's very, very cool, man. Well, and what a great segue, because Rich, you and I've known each other for a little while. And so I understand how you're wired, and, I know the man that God created. And when I talk to Rich Hall, I know there's a connection between this jazz experience and what you just said about the beauty of the different things that we encounter in life and the work that you do today. So why don't you
Yes.
walk us through that connection, man?
Yeah. So, for me, most of my career has been tied in some form or fashion of what I would either call turnarounds or in some way of rapid growth, whether it's the company I'm working for is about to go under and Rich, we got to find a way, or it's we've got to be ready for and acquired in 9 months or less. And that's been my career path with increasing responsibility along the way. And I finally got to the point where, after I finished my last one, I said, you know what? Let me take a step back and pause. And then what is it I really want to do? And that's what I enjoy doing, is really getting in there and doing the transformation of the company, the employees, the owners, to achieve that lifetime goal. And so I became became a business advisor. And then I got what's called an exit planning advisor certification. And all of those things that I've done throughout my career are applicable to what I do today. And when you're able to go in and sit with a family and they're talking about their lifelong dream, and you're able to show them a path and walk them through the path of what needs to be done to achieve it, to me, there's no better career, for anybody. And I was born to do this.
That's so cool, man. And I'm so excited that we have you as a guest on the podcast, Rich, because you and I've talked about this a lot. The idea of the exit of the transition out of the business is something that we actually look for at Alteza when we're serving a founder. And we have a lot of founders listening to this podcast. We always ask them, what is the dream you have for your business one day? And it's really interesting to me how few people really have a concrete answer to that question. And it really is amazing because I know, and maybe it's because I hung out with a couple of folks who built a business and had a really successful exit, that I started my business with an end in mind, with a legacy in mind, right? So, but I feel like that's really rare. But would you agree with that? Do you feel like that's rare for most founders to be thinking about the end when they start the business?
Absolutely, Steve. And they don't think about an end. And I mean, let's think about it. When you've got some of your, let's say, older generations, they were inclined to start a business and build it from scratch. And their blood, sweat, and tears, their family, everything went into it. And they've made it in some form successful. But in many cases, it's also just second nature. And they don't think that, wait, at some day, I've got to think about what I'm going to do beyond the business or the family. Or, hey, I know where all the skeletons are today, but what if somebody came in off the street? Could they take over and run the business? They don't think about that. And in most cases, they haven't been exposed to it. So they really don't know what goes into a highly attractive or valuable company.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And I can't wait to unpack this conversation more. I think, in my view, the thing that when you think of the transition out of the business, I feel like the biggest mistake that founders make that impacts that moment, that transition moment, is the failure to be thinking about it when they started the business. But that's just my personal perspective on it. I could be wrong. What do you think? What do you think is the biggest mistake that founders make when it comes to the transition?
The sad part it's got nothing to do with the business. And when I work with the founders and the owners, the business aspect is second tier. Because we really focus on, all right, Mr. Business Owner, what does the future look like? What have you envisioned that time frame? And surprisingly, most are so focused on getting there that they don't know what they're going to do at that point forward. It's usually travel, play golf.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, that's going to last you about 6 months, maybe 12 if you're lucky. And then you're going to
Yeah.
be bored.
Yeah.
And then we talk about that. And then they don't always have an answer, but we give them something to think about. And then we talk with their wealth advisor. If they have one, we loop them in. If not, I'll make some referrals. But say, okay, based on what that vision looks like, what's it going to take financially? And then now, because here's how it all ties back together and how it's so important, is once you have a number and you have what that future looks like, now we can start talking about the business and what needs to be done. Where would it sell today if we put it on the market? And if it does, fantastic. Do you want to go ahead and, put it on the market today? But odds are it doesn't. So now we got a little work to do. But along the path, we always refer back to those personal and the financial goals because that's more important than anything. It drives the type buyers, ties whether or not legacy is important to them, and it ties family together. And we always come back to it to say, are we still aligned? Because we can go down different paths. But once you finally get to the point and the numbers match, then the numbers are not quite as relevant as it is, well, what's going to happen to these people? Or what's going to happen to my family? Or the company name that's become so respectful and I've worked so hard for. So that's the interesting factor that a lot of people don't see, Steve, is when you're talking about this type work, don't start with the business. As you know, it's personal. Start with the sales. Start with the relationship. And then that will drive, our path forward.
Okay,
Yeah,
Rich,
that's
all
so
of that was just gold. And, one of the things I was thinking about as you were sharing all of that is obviously you're working with founders who have been focused, right? They're in the trenches. They're doing everything. They're doing the selling. They're building all the things that are necessary for them. And it's almost like they can get super myopic on, I've got to just get this thing off the ground. I got to get it going. And they just get laser focused in. And then the conversation you started to talk through was, okay, now I want out. And there's these discoveries that they start to go through, right? The discoveries of, okay, what do I really want? What is this aligned towards? And you started to say some of those things, which I think are absolutely fantastic. But could you share with us one discovery that you're like, Drew, this one doesn't get talked about a lot, but this one discovery, man, is a really important piece that if people really understood the power behind this, it could really start to set them up for when they are ready to make that decision and get out. What would you say is that?
No question. If they come to work every day and they have to make most of the decisions and the company cannot run without them effectively, that's the number one factor that impacts the value of the company. And a question I ask very quick, when was the last time you took a 3-week vacation and turned your cell phone off? If you can't do that, then we've got some work to do. And they're right off. The question is, what does that mean? I've got a good team in place. Yeah, but here's the thing. A buyer coming in looking at your business is not looking to keep it as is. They're looking to grow it. But if everything goes through the owner, how do you replace a person like that? You can't. So either they require the owner to stay on long after the deal is done to do a transition, or they have to hire a lot of people to replace the one owner. Either way, it really impacts the deal. So I tell them right off, we need to set up the systems, the processes, the people, the environment so that you're always working on the business, not in the business. and that if something happened, it could continue running without you. You do that, you got a highly valuable business.
Now, Rich, everything you just said, if I'm an owner and I hear you say, what would happen if you left for 3 weeks and turn your cell phone off? I'm sitting here going, oh my God, that sounds like a dream. That sounds amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
I would
Then
say
help me understand, why is it so hard for an owner to actually build something that doesn't include them, when really what they're speaking, it's almost like what they're saying, yes, I want to be able to leave and it not depend on me, but yet when they leave and they come back, see, you guys need me, it's almost like this weird, interdependence on each other. They want it, but really what they're doing doesn't set them up. What do you think is that reasoning for why founders don't actually create that?
It's very hard to give up.
Like
When
it's
you
their
build,
baby.
well, meaning close, but meaning you start the business, so much of it is about control, right? I know
Identity.
that if I watch this or watch that, it's going to be done right. And even as they go further and the company starts growing, they have to learn how to delegate and trust, and then build the systems around them to monitor, the KPIs, the things that, we learned from business school kind of thing, but this is real life and practical. And so many have a hard time. And the reality, it's not that bad. It's, you got to start somewhere. Do you have a good leadership team? Do you have the right metrics, the processes in place? And if not, let's get to work. Let's build them. It's not insurmountable, but they've got to be willing to let go of some of that. And that's arguably the hardest thing that they run into.
Yeah, dude. Is that identity? Is that an identity crisis? Like, I don't know who I am if I'm not doing these things.
Hey, that's the big factor after the sale.
Yeah.
And I mean, Steve, you nailed it. I'm part of an organization in Houston called Silver Fox Advisors. And it's an organization, it's volunteer, of people that have achieved a certain level, whether it's in business or, many have sold their companies and et cetera. And we give back to the small business community, and we run CEO roundtables and things like that. A lot of those people in this organization with me, Silver Fox, are those that really struggled and had a hard time after they sold, because they were like, Rich, when I came to work every day, everyone's saying, well, hey, Mr. Hall, how was your weekend? Now nobody cares. Or when I made a decision as an owner of a company, it could be a multi-million-dollar decision. Well, I may make a multi-million-dollar decision afterwards for our family or whatever, but guess what? Nobody cares. So, man, that comment about identity is major, and they've got to find a way to replace that. And many, when we talked about 6 to 12 months of golf and travel, many then will come back and may even take over another company, go to work with other companies, something to just fill that identity. So huge, Steve, you're spot on.
By the way, I feel like I need to just stick up for the ball guys and say, could you have a club called the Naked Fox? Could we have the Naked Fox?
And the bad part, Steve, when I joined, I'm like, man, I'm not one of these guys. I'm the kid on the block. And then I looked in my mirror and my wife looked at me and said, trust me, man, there's silver there. I'm like, all right, well, at least I've still got a little bit of hair left, but
Yeah. At least
put it
you
this
have
way,
that.
man, I'll pray for your hair to come back. How's that, Steve?
Resurrection.
That's right, man. We're talking about the power of prayer, and you're going to need a lot of it.
That's awesome.
Some prayer and Rogaine. You never know what can happen between the two. Also, Steve,
never know.
I'm interested if you Google that name to see what shows up as far as like availability when it comes to websites.
Not going to do that, Drew. Wouldn't be
Oh my
prudent.
gosh.
Yes, right.
be prudent.
Okay, Rich, let me ask you this. Earlier, you had mentioned personal, financial, and business goals, right? 3 different categories. Talk to me about when you talk to an owner who is exiting, how often are those 3 things actually aligned? And if they're not, what do you do about that?
They're rarely aligned because, again, they typically focus on the end goal. They wake up one day and they say, or the wife's nudging them, I'm tired, I'm worn out, it's time to sell. And they don't think about these as much. So I don't want to say all, because many that have become much more sophisticated, whether it's in their finances or they've reached a certain level where they've invested in certain advisors and et cetera, they'll talk about each one individually. But when it comes time to tying it all together, rarely do I run into any that have put them all together. And then when I walk them through, we're going to go on a journey together. And we need to make sure that we're talking about we understand what the financial goals are, but now we're going to talk about how to get there. And oh, by the way, we're going to circle back to these goals. And it could take a year, it could take 3 years, whatever that number is to get to it. But we're always going to come back to that foundation. And they greatly appreciate it because they don't know what they're going to run into. But then when you start getting, again, you're talking about the business or you're talking about taxes. Again, you sell your company, it's not what the sale price of your company is what you net. And guess what? If you can structure the deal in such a way where, let's say it's long-term capital gains and you're paying 19%, or you find out that maybe you're a qualified small business and you fit the criteria and you don't have to pay any tax at all on the sale of your business. The worst case are the ones that end up selling it and immediately get popped for 40% taxes.
Yeah.
And then they have they're like, wait a minute, there's not enough left over to do what I wanted to do. So we make sure and tie all of it together throughout. And the more they're educated, the better decisions they make longer term.
That is so good. And everything you've said, it's like, this is a very nuanced discussion. Like, there's a lot of pieces that go into, if I'm a founder, I'm thinking about exiting, there's a lot of things to be thinking about. I mean, everything from, like you just said, structuring for tax purposes afterwards, right? Little things I wouldn't even be thinking about because I'm all about building the business here. So let's say we've got a founder who's listening in right now, and they're doing most of the selling, and they haven't thought much about the exit. And with all of these different nuanced pieces of discussion that are happening right now, what would you say is the first thing that they should be thinking about as they start to go down this road of entertaining exiting the business?
Think it's really focused on what is it you're trying to accomplish or what is it to achieve, and spend time with your spouse, your kids, and really have that clear in your mind. And most don't initially, but through the course, it allows you to stay focused, because your other part, you're going to have to make some tough decisions. Maybe as you grow, you got to change out some people because you need to find that right kind of leader that can step in. Or maybe as you start backing off, who's the right person to delegate to? And so there's a lot of things you have to go through. But if you know what the end game looks like, you don't mind as much what it takes to go through the journey to get there. And we focus on all of that, not only up front, but along the way. So we try to make it as painless as possible, but always come back. And if it looks like they're swaying a little bit, we'll stop and talk and say, all right, is this strategic? Are you really doing that? Or are you chasing after something that looks attractive that may not be headed toward the goal you're trying to?
That's really interesting. What would be an example of that, Rich? What would be an attractive, like shiny object that might distract them like that? Anything
You could, I would give, okay, you asked me the question, but I could easily turn that back around because you'd know exactly the answer. Chasing revenue that's not in alignment with your vision or mission of the company.
Yeah.
You can chase a huge deal that's got a lot of cash and it sounds great, but then you got to support it. And does it cause cash flow issues for the company? So younger in life, younger companies, man, sometimes you got to chase dollars because, you got to make payroll, you're still trying to find out your way. But one of the top things that can kill a company, as you know, is veering off. And then how do you right size them and bring them back? So just
Yeah.
keep them that focused, to me is the big thing.
Yeah. No, I love it. It reminds me of, I don't know who said it, but I heard one time where someone said a top line revenue is a vanity metric and net profit is a sanity metric, right?
Yeah.
And, we can chase the shiny objects for the sake of net top line gross revenue and then kill our net profit and our sanity in the process, right? So
Yes.
this is a personal question, Rich. And so sometimes this podcast ends up being a counseling session, for me and others. So here's the opportunity. So I'm a living and breathing example of a founder who has a skill set in a variety of areas, but especially in sales. And so when it comes to that time when I got to delegate, I need to really turn it over to somebody else so that I can free myself up and create that enterprise value that will help in that eventual exit. How do you help someone like me take something that they're really, really good at, take a founder like me who's really good at sales and turn that into an asset that I can then pass to somebody else? How do you help them navigate that?
Well, great question, because we find this a lot in family-owned businesses as well, right? A lot of family businesses say, I'm at that point and I really need to find somebody or something. So, hey, here's Junior. And it can be emotional. It can be tied to, well, they've been here the longest and here's a natural person to do it. So what I always do is, all right, let's create two things. As the owner, founder of the company, one, let's create a job description. Everybody has job descriptions and you pretty much throw the kitchen sink into it and everything you could possibly come up with, right?
No, that doesn't happen, right, Rich?
Not a bit, man. And here's the thing, everybody applies knowing that only about half of that stuff is really applicable. But here's the cool one too, is you create what's called a success profile for that particular role. And to flip it in a different direction, what does it take to be successful in this company? Got to have this kind of background. You got to be able to put up with some upset customers when it comes to you. Maybe you need to know this kind of knowledge or experience. All right. And once you put that together, that becomes sort of the factual thing that you compare it to. And then what I'll say is you can either go to market and look for that person, or maybe you've got somebody internal, but what you do is now you've got something to compare them against. And what I'll help the business owner is, okay, let's say you've got Junior. Now let's sit down and write the resume or the capability, whatever you want to call it, and the culture and the personality and the demeanor and et cetera. And what's the gap? That's what you're focused on, is what is that gap that needs to be filled and how are you going to fill it? And when you start putting it that way, it's like, all right, Mr. Business Owner, do you have time to help them fill that gap? And how big is the gap? If you do, then yeah, fantastic. Go to Junior or somebody within your staff. And in a lot of cases, there's some that are close. Many times when you walk through that exercise, though, is it opens their eyes to what's really important about their role, because they don't think about all the things that they do because it's natural. They're the founder. They've been doing it for decades.
Yep.
So what happens is they turn around and then we start saying, all right, who out there, internal or external, can be the closest to actually fulfilling that gap in that role. And to be honest with you guys, there's a lot of environments out there where I've instructed the business owner or the founder that, you know what, there's a lot of work needs to be done here. And if we're not going to be able to get there for whatever reason, could be time frame, energy, maybe money, then I said, you don't have to sell your company. Find somebody, incentivize them very well to come in and run it, and let that become your lifetime annuity for you and your family.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what are you going to do? In most cases, take the proceeds from the sale, put it into an investments, and then they create you a lifetime annuity.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and in most cases, that's not as popular because a lot of, you know, people think about the exit. But if you do it right and it's a sustainable business model, it could provide tremendous income. And then guess what? There's nothing to say that person couldn't be the one to get it across the finish line to make it sellable at some point in the future.
Yeah. Man, I love that because I think that was an aha moment for me at some point in time. I think sitting in a Vistage meeting at some point in time where I realized, hey, everybody talks about the exit from the standpoint of I sold it for X number of $1 million and I had the big celebration and the big number, the big exit. And that is a thing for sure. But what you're talking about can be absolutely just as powerful, right? Because to your point, you take that lump sum of money and what do? You go invest it so that it creates an income stream for you. But if the business can create that same income stream because you, again, found somebody who can take it to the next level, not only do you get that income stream, but again, you get maybe another bite at the apple down the road, right?
You're exactly right, Steve. And it's probably one of my biggest differentiators is because, and as we've shared a little bit with some of my clients, if it makes sense, I'll actually help them sell their company. So I'll perform that role as well. Well, the thing is, there's a lot of people in the industry and advisors that make a lot of money when a company sells. And many can be biased toward that event.
The sale. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not wired that way. I'm wired toward what's the right thing to do for this founder, their family, the company. And if it makes sense to, guess what? We may have a lot of work to do and it may take 3 years to get there. If it takes another year to sell it, you're looking at 4 years. Do you have 4 years worth of energy or gas left in the tank? And if they say, Rich, I just don't know, man, my health is failing, my husband or my wife or whoever's health, and we got grandkids, we want to spend time with the kids. But if I sell it now, I won't get much for it. And I say, tell you what, let's get somebody in here, take a year and a half of the transition. You elevate up to, say, a chairman role of the company. Now you're still getting the proceeds of the company. You can do those things, be available for quarterly board meetings. And yet now you're able to achieve the goal in half or if not a third of the time. And then, like you said, Steve, some point in the future, opportunity pops up and somebody comes in, phone call comes in and says, we'll offer you that 10 to 12X. Now you've got a well-run company without the founder making all the decisions that will give you that, exit you were looking for.
Love that. That's just it opens up a whole different avenue of thinking, I think.
Yes.
Well, and it as a founder, I know for me as an individual who I like options, I like to know that there's not just one way to go after something or to accomplish something. And hearing you kind of break that down, that this really can be a customized fit towards whatever that goal and that objective, kind of bringing it back to what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, having alignment, having clarity, having understanding around what that goal is. And then we can get creative about how we get there. And because the ultimate goal is the ultimate goal. And however we get there doesn't really matter in the long run. It's about getting to that end goal. And I think I love that because I love the creativity that's a part of that. So if you were to, again, think about founders who are listening to this podcast, who are thinking about this, what's one thing that you wish that every founder knew before they started? They could go back, they were just getting ready to launch a Sing and Go, and you could plant that seed. You could do the inception into their mind, right? What would you plant in there to get them prepared and ready for?
Piece of cake. The difference between revenue of a company and the value of the company. Most don't know the difference.
So yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Revenue, obviously. You've got to generate revenue. You got to be profitable over time because mouths need to be fed. And you can generate a tremendous income with a income-based or revenue-based company, but it doesn't mean it's sellable. And people are surprised when, Rich, what do you mean? My company's generating $1 million a month or 10 million, profit a year. Why would it not be sellable? Okay, you're too involved in the day-to-day of the business. More than 25% of your sales comes from an individual, client that you play golf with each weekend. Well, what do you think is going to happen to that client when you retire? They're going to open it up for bid and go somewhere else. Or let's say you've got your supplier vendors are highly concentrated and you've been getting all of your supplies and inventory from that vendor. And guess what? You play golf with the other one, you go to the country club with this one. There's basics out there that drive the value of a company. And the biggest thing that I get the most satisfaction out of is when we first have the conversations and I educate them about the difference between revenue and value or income and value-based companies, and they start getting the value side. They're like, I wish somebody had told me that years ago, because now I always want to create a valuable business that also generates really great income. But when you got a valuable one, and let's say that phone call comes in and somebody says, I'll offer you 10X, I'll offer you 15X, and what I call stupid money, guess what happens? Your valuable company, odds are pretty good, is going to sell for that because they're not going to find these problems that we've talked about all the way up front beginning the journey. So if they could go back and do that when they first started, those are the ones that would be the most successful.
That's really good, man.
Cool.
And Rich, you know what? If the answer to this question is what I just said, that's totally cool. But one of the things that I've learned running a business is that some of the most valuable lessons about what works and doesn't work come from failures, right? So I know it's hard for you to believe this, Rich, but we've actually had clients we work with that it didn't work.
Yeah.
You're shocked to hear that, I know, but it's true. We've actually failed with some clients. So when you think about a failed transition, whether you've been involved with it or not, is there a lesson that you learned through a failed transition that's different than what you just shared there? Or is it pretty much the same?
A lot of it's the same, but what I would say is, again, let me give you an example of one that I didn't do, but I was an executive with the company. And the owner had a family-owned business and had no intent to sell, but venture capital backed their biggest competitor, and they came calling. And they weren't prepared. They didn't know what all this selling process and value and all that kind of stuff meant. And I'll never forget that the owner did absolutely fantastic financially. But then we got together for coffee about a week later, and he said, Rich, I can't handle the phone calls. I got people that's been with me for 12, 15 years, and they're out of work. And that is absolutely killing me because I can't do anything about it. Well, he was right, and it was very hard. But if you go all the way back to the conversation about what's important to you in those 3 goals, that greatly dictates the type buyer that you end up selling to.
Yeah.
And that's probably the thing, because after that, Steve, I may not be the right fit.
Yeah.
They may have learned about what they're doing and say, you know what, now I know I'm going to go down a different path. We may not work together, and that's fine. But at least I walk away with the satisfaction of knowing, you know what, they're an educated, business owner that'll make the right decisions for themselves and their family going forward.
Yeah.
That's what, my goal is.
That's so good. Well, and I'm going to say something that you're a gentleman and a scholar too, by the way, and you wouldn't say this. I'm going to say it for you because I've seen this happen before in my life. I've been around guys who've sold a business. And
Mhm.
I've seen one example of it that went incredibly well. I saw another example of it that on the surface, based on the number, went really well. Because if you just judge it by the number, it was like, wow, that's a big number. But here's what I know is true from behind the scenes is the aftermath of the sale that was done without counsel, without somebody like
Mhm.
you helping them navigate through this conversation about what is it I want and what do I want to be true after the sale. The aftermath was really, really nasty. And the people that were impacted by that sale on the other side of it, it
Mhm.
was largely a really negative experience. And those people that helped get that company to the place where it sold for a lot of money are not there anymore. Because what
Yes.
happened on the other side wasn't anything like what was happening before the sale. And guess what? The guy that built it, his values would have been completely antithetical to what happened after the sale, but he did it on his own. He didn't have somebody helping him through it. And so he sold because he got the number. He probably could have gotten a much bigger number, by the way, than he did. But then the aftermath of the sale was nothing that looked like legacy at all. And it was sad, to be honest with you. So I
Yes.
think that piece of it, when I think about the biggest lesson that I learned watching those two things happen is don't do this by yourself.
It's having the right advisors or asking the right questions is critically important. And a little short one, I'll give you an example. There's a gentleman that was not a client of mine, but had a family-owned business, and they were making really good money for the business and brought in their son, and he came into the business. And then a large family office came in and said, listen, we want to buy your company, but if you don't sell it to us, we're going to buy your competitor and put you out of business.
Thank you.
So they allowed everything. Yeah, really. I was like, oh, thank you very much. That ought to tell you something. They allowed
So much for
the
family
process.
office.
Yeah. The process to move very fast. And they had not been through it before, and they were very trusting. They were good people, good family people. Well, they got a very nice payout. But here's the thing. They also ended up with a 5-year earnout.
Oof.
Which meant, a large percentage, decent percentage of their payout was based upon performance of the company over 5 years. You remember when you went back a few minutes ago and said about the identity?
Yep.
Well, imagine coming into work the very next day and you're no longer the boss.
Yeah.
But guess what? If that company doesn't perform at the level you agreed to, you don't get your money, but you're still there for 5 years or you lose it. And I see that a lot because they didn't know any better. They're really good people and they see the top line number, but not, the what actually ends up happening. And a year and a half in, the guy's absolutely miserable.
That sounds
yeah. It's horrible horror stories.
Yeah.
But to your supporting your point, Steve, having the right advisors, you don't have to rush. Don't let anybody rush you along. Always the other part too, hire the right kind of legal counsel. If you're selling your company, find an M&A attorney and one that may specialize in your size company, your industry, etc. You don't have to go and pay $1,000 an hour for a big law attorney if your company is, say 10 million. Maybe a little bit smaller company, but right size it and get the right representation and they'll take care of you.
Yeah. That's so good, man. I think as you were sharing that last story, what that felt like was I didn't build a business, I built a prison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And imagine you've done a fantastic job with Alteza. And one of these days, here's the thing, man, everybody's going to exit,
one way or the other.
One way or the other, it's 100%. But what most people don't think, most business owners, we call them the 5 Ds: death, disease, distress, financial distress, divorce, disabilities, and those things can happen without being planned. So going back to that whole point, how do we run a valuable company, have the right people around us, so that regardless of what happens, we're prepared for the opportunity or whatever may happen. And if the opportunity is now's the right time, then you're in a position to negotiate very strong to minimize things like earnouts or what's required of you after the sale. And then you end up with a much bigger net number, and you're able to go off and start doing the things you dreamed about doing, all because you worked on it properly along the way.
Drop the mic.
Awesome.
Drop the mic, baby.
I love it.
But yeah, that's as you can tell, I love what I do, but I also hate the horror stories when, I hear the ones that come in that didn't do this and they say, wow, man, I wish I had. So spread the news. We're just trying to get the word out and let people make the right decisions for them and their family and all their loved ones.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, Rich, one last question. Where can people find you? How can they connect with you and learn more?
The best way is to hit my website. It's called richhallgroup.com. There's a lot of we follow a process. There's a lot of collateral out there. Feel free to download it. There's a lot of information. It's got my contact information on there. But it's really about educating people, and nobody's going to call you, but it's really good information. That would be the best. And then you can connect on social media. We do a lot of work on LinkedIn and really try to further this education. So either way is a good way. And, if we can help people, that's what we're wired to do.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, guys, we've unfortunately come to the end of our time. This has been really good. We end every episode with a toast. This week, Steve, you're up.
Yeah, let's toast. So raise the glass. And here's to helping business owners write the perfect story for that chapter where they step out of the business. Like a perfectly mixed Jack and Coke, with a lime, by the way.
With a lime.
Of course.
It's all about finding the right balance. May your exits be smooth, may your valuations be high, and your legacy lasting. Until next time, keep building value and enjoying life's simple pleasures. Cheers.
Let's go.
Cheers, dude. That was good.
Awesome. Good stuff,
That was
man.
excellent. Listening to Rich talk about transitions and exits, I keep coming back to something that Alteza thinks about every single day. The best founders eventually learn to scale beyond themselves. And it sounds like sales advice, and it is, but it's also life advice. Because the moment you build a business that doesn't need you in every conversation and doesn't need you at every close and doesn't need your personal brand to survive, that's the moment you actually have choices. Choices about when to step away, about what comes next, about the kind of life you get to live. And that's what Rich is really helping people do. Not just exit, but help them engineer a business that's worth exiting from. So for everyone listening, go to richhallgroup.com. And this has been Whiskey is for Closers. We'll see you next time. Remember, the best closers aren't the ones who hold on the tightest. They're the ones who know when to let go. Cheers.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.